deputies at the Roundtable Conference have all officially reported it is complete independence that we want.
Before he became the symbol of peace recognized around the world, Mahatma Gandhi once wrote a letter directly to Adolf Hitler, addressing him as "Dear Friend," in a last desperate attempt to prevent a global war. It is a startling detail few people know, and it reveals a man whose belief in nonviolence was so absolute that he was willing to confront history's darkest forces with nothing but words and moral courage. In this video, you will discover how an ordinary, deeply flawed man evolved into one of the most powerful figures the world has ever known, and why his methods terrified an empire armed with guns and armies. Watch until the very end, because Gandhi's journey holds lessons that feel more urgent today than ever before. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was born on October 2, 1869, in Porbandar, or India's western coast, then under the shadow of the British Empire. His father served as a chief minister in small princely states, and the household carried the weight of public duty. Yet it was his mother, Putlibai, who left the deepest mark. Intensely devotional, disciplined, and shaped by Hindu traditions infused with Jain influences that emphasized self-control, fasting, and nonviolence. Gandhi did not grow up as a natural firebrand. By most accounts, he was timid, inward, and intensely self-conscious, so anxious at times that he preferred sleeping with a light on even as he got older. That quiet exterior hid a young man wrestling with contradictions. As a teenager, he experimented with rule-breaking, testing boundaries in ways he later confessed with discomfort and detail. At 13, he entered an arranged marriage with Kasturba Makhanji. The marriage began as tradition demanded, but it matured through hardship and long separations into a partnership that would anchor much of his public life. At 19, Gandhi sailed to London to study law. The city was modern, self-assured, and unbothered by the anxieties of a colonial subject trying to fit in. He attempted at first to adapt, learning social codes, reshaping habits, and confronting the pressure to become acceptable in a society that viewed him as peripheral. The effort was exhausting, and it forced a question that would follow him for life. How do you engage a dominant culture without surrendering your moral identity to it? In London, he began to deepen rather than dilute his convictions. He committed to vegetarianism not as a trend, but as a discipline, joining groups that treated diet as ethics, not preference. More importantly, he started reading broadly across religious texts and philosophies, searching for a kind of truth that could withstand both temptation and humiliation. When he returned to India in 1891, the homecoming was brutal. He learned his mother had died while he was away, and the grief landed alongside professional failure. His early legal career was shaky. In one defining moment, nerves overwhelmed him in court, and he froze when expected to cross-examine a witness. He withdrew, embarrassed and uncertain, and for a time it looked like the world would never hear his name. Opportunity sent Gandhi to South Africa on a one-year legal contract, but the experience remade him. The discrimination faced by Indians there was not subtle. It was legal, social, and enforced with everyday cruelty. Early on, he was asked to remove his turban in a courtroom. He refused and left, choosing dignity over acceptance. Then came the incident that has echoed throughout history. Despite holding a valid first-class ticket, he was ordered out of a first-class railway compartment, and when he resisted, he was thrown off the train at Pietermaritzburg. Alone at a station in the cold, he confronted a choice that would define his life: rage or resolve. That night did not produce a sudden superhero. It produced a decision. The injustice was not just personal insult. It was a system, and systems required strategy. Gandhi began organizing Indian communities, helping form political associations, and learning how to translate private humiliation into public action. He realized that the state's power depended, in part, on compliance, on people agreeing to be managed, categorized, and intimidated. If that compliance could be withdrawn without chaos, the moral legitimacy of the oppressor could be exposed. From this came the seed of what he called satyagraha, a force rooted in truth and firmness. It was not passive in the way many people imagine. It was a disciplined confrontation, refusing unjust laws, accepting consequences, and using suffering as evidence of the law's immorality. In South Africa, campaigns against oppressive registration policies and discriminatory measures escalated. Protesters were jailed, families were strained. Gandhi himself was imprisoned. Yet, over time, pressure mounted. Negotiations took place and concessions followed. Proof in Gandhi's eyes that nonviolent resistance could bend political reality without becoming the mirror image of the violence it opposed. When Gandhi returned to India, he brought more than a philosophy. He brought a blueprint for mass action. He established a communal base, an ashram, where simplicity was not symbolic decoration, but daily practice. Limited possessions, prayer, fasting, and work meant to dissolve ego and build self-command. The visual image became part of the message. His plain clothing and austere habits were a rebuke to both colonial luxury and Indian elite distance. He was not asking the poor to follow him into sacrifice. He was trying to meet them there. The political landscape hardened after World War I. Repressive measures like the Rowlatt legislation enabled detention without trial, and anger surged across India. Gandhi called for organized, nonviolent cooperation like peaceful protests, strikes, and boycotts. But the movement existed in a volatile reality, and violence erupted in places, culminating in catastrophic bloodshed, such as the Amritsar massacre. Gandhi, appalled by the violence, recalibrated, even when it disappointed supporters who wanted escalation. To him, a movement that achieved freedom by losing its moral core would inherit a poisoned victory. He urged Indians to boycott British institutions and goods, and he emphasized economic self-reliance as a form of political resistance. The spinning wheel and homespun cloth became more than crafts. They became a national statement. If Britain's empire relied on selling manufactured goods to a captive market, then refusing those goods was a direct hit to imperial authority. Gandhi's leadership elevated him into the central figure of the independence movement, but it also made him a target. He was arrested and tried for sedition, imprisoned, and released later due to health issues. Each imprisonment, rather than silencing him, amplified the contrast he wanted the world to see: an empire armed with laws and weapons versus a man insisting that conscience could be stronger than coercion. In 1930, Gandhi selected an issue that seemed almost absurdly ordinary: salt, to reveal the extraordinary mechanics of colonial rule. Salt was not a luxury. It was daily survival, especially for the poor. Yet the British monopoly and taxes turned it into a symbol of domination. Gandhi's genius was in understanding narrative. If millions could see injustice in something as basic as salt, they could recognize the larger theft of freedom embedded in everything else. He began the Salt March from his community base, walking hundreds of kilometers to the sea with a small group that grew day after day as people joined along the route. The march turned into a moving nation. Villagers, laborers, and supporters watching a political argument unfold on foot. When Gandhi finally reached the shore and made salt in defiance of the law, the act was simple, but it detonated the world's attention. Mass protests followed. Thousands were jailed. Gandhi was arrested. Yet the colonial administration, despite all its legal power, looked exposed. It was imprisoning people over salt, and in doing so, it proved the moral bankruptcy of the system. Negotiations and conferences came and went, sometimes producing minor concessions, often producing frustration. Meanwhile, Gandhi also fought battles with Indian society, particularly against the dehumanization of communities labeled untouchable. He used fasts, not as theatrics, but as moral pressure aimed at his own people as much as at colonial authorities, insisting that freedom meant nothing if it preserved cruelty at home. Over time, he stepped back from formal political roles, then returned again when history demanded it, especially during World War II. By 1942, Gandhi and the Congress leadership launched the Quit India movement, demanding immediate British withdrawal. The response was swift: arrests, crackdowns, detention of leaders, including Gandhi and Kasturba. During this period, personal tragedy struck again when Kasturba died while Gandhi was still detained. The movement endured repression, but the political equation had shifted. Britain emerged from the war weakened. Global opinion was changing, and the cost of holding India by force was rising. Independence was approaching, but with it came a terrifying question. What kind of independence would it be? The final stretch to independence was not a clean victory march. It was a crisis of identity. Negotiations among the British, the Congress Party, and the Muslim League produced a plan that carved the subcontinent into two states, India and Pakistan, along religious lines. Gandhi opposed partition with everything he had, fearing it would institutionalize division and unleash mass violence. Yet politics moved faster than his hopes. When partition became reality in 1947, the streets told the story he feared: riots, massacres, and waves of displacement as communities turned on neighbors. Gandhi responded the only way he believed he honestly could: by going where the violence was, appealing for sanity, and fasting to force moral confrontation. On January 30th, 1948, in Delhi, Gandhi was shot by Nathuram Godse, a Hindu extremist. The man who had tried to make suffering a tool for transformation became the victim of the very cycle he spent his life resisting. His death triggered public mournings on an enormous scale, and his legacy spread far beyond India's borders. Gandhi remains a complicated figure, revered, debated, and sometimes misunderstood. But the central drama of his life is hard to dismiss. He demonstrated that the struggle for justice is not only fought with force, it can also be fought with discipline, symbolism, organization, and moral clarity so consistent that it exposes violence as weakness.